In reality, history should not repeat itself. History should be what already occurred and not to be repeated. But through a lack of understanding, as the Bible teaches, my people perish for a lack of knowledge.
Right.
When you don't have knowledge of something,
Right.
history will repeat itself.
Right.
So along with that, I'd like to thank you for such a show that you're doing at this time. Well, there is a highlight of black people, African American, or the Negro accomplishment, and it's very needed.
Good evening, I'm Sandy Powell. Welcome to the Round Table. We are honoring here at the Round Table our Black History Month. I myself want to give tribute as well to the accomplishments of our people. When I say people, I mean African Americans, blacks, and or if you prefer Negroes, whichever your preference is. But I too do understand the accomplishments that we have made as a people. I understand and appreciate how far we have come from our history. The one thing that I am going to do with this show today is to also bring understanding and enlightenment to not only myself, but just to a broad audience about our history as a whole. And I am one to understand that history forgotten will repeat itself. And so it is important for us to know not just the positive things that we have done, but to understand some of the negative things that we have done so that we cannot repeat those things. And it's so easy for us to hide it or to try to set it aside and not see what we see about ourselves as a people. That we will find ourselves not getting any better at what we need to improve upon. So today, in honor of Black History, we're going to take a total look at our accomplishments as well as overlooking our history. And today I have with me none other than my partner in life, my husband, Prathan L. Powell, known to some as Prophet, known to some as Prathan.
Yes. Your just an age doesn't matter.
Yeah, at a certain age, it doesn't matter what they call you. Long as they don't call you late for meals, right?
There you go.
Well, we're kind of wrapping up the Black History Month, and this topic is one that I think that is a necessity. We do talk about all of the accomplishments of our forefathers and some current Black African Americans who have done great things that we all highlight. But there are some people that we know, that you and I know, that are not necessarily famous, but have accomplished some great things. And we really don't always highlight those people and really give them any shine. But, you know, our history is rich, and it's not only in the rich and the famous. How about that?
That's so true.
I think that our community is full of people who have accomplished great things, done a lot of good things in our community. We have good mothers, good fathers. We have good uncles and aunts. We have good pastors. We have good teachers. We have good child care providers. We have good grandmama, big mama, who have, big mama, who have done awesome things. Had it not been for these people, some of the people that we know that are rich and famous and have done things that the world is highlighting may not have done those things without some of these smaller people who may not get the recognition, but are part of our history and the richness of our heritage. So I wanted to kind of talk about that a little bit today too, that the importance of our community as a whole, not just the rich and the famous doing our Black history, but recognizing your everyday average person, and go through that, and then to talk about what I say is the flip side of our history, which is not the not so good stuff that we are living through now, and finding ourselves battling with people as to why we are where we are today. So,
Yes, I like when you opened up when you spoke about history repeating itself. And reality, history should not repeat itself. History should be what already occurred and not to be repeated. But through a lack of understanding, as the Bible teaches, my people perish for a lack of knowledge.
Right.
When you don't have knowledge of something,
Right.
history will repeat itself.
Right.
So along with that, I'd like to thank you for such a show that you're doing at this time. Well, there is a highlight of black people, African American, or the Negro accomplishment, and it's very needed. But with the flip side of something that's not an accomplishment, because we are not fulfilling history
Right.
of not being what we once were
Right.
to become what we should.
right. And I think I started off talking about your everyday average person who touched so many of us when we were younger. Grandmama, big mama, or big papa, or your teachers, your pastors, and your Sunday school teachers.
Yeah.
These people, some of these people had great impact, positive impact on what we are today as a people. And we fail sometimes to give them the applause and the kudos that they deserve for, first of all, being a part and being willing to impart and nurture our future so that they can have a brighter future for tomorrow. And so my thought to give them a hand clap for what they have done is also to remember that we have to get back to that.
Yes.
That this is kind of a lost thing or becoming rare in our black community. It's only pockets of it and of positive role models in our community, right hands-on. We have to go so far now to have a role model. We have to go to TV now to have a role model, where our role models used to be within our community, right around us. Now, in some areas, the role models are not there. They're not seeing us in an accomplished way, and they're now depending upon what they know.
Social media.
Right, social media to determine whether or not what they're going to be and how great they're going to be at it. But unfortunately, our community, the black community, and I said this on Sunday, talking to a person, that going to church on Sunday used to be the norm.
Yeah.
It was a rarity to see busyness during church hours when the church's hours were open, that the streets were barren because people went to church. And now it's not so much that way. Now Sunday has become a day of rest away from the church.
Well, historically, the black church, where it derived from, out of the slavery, which that's not our history. Our history goes back to our homeland,
Right.
which is Africa. We always have been a religious people of faith. It's just that when we came to this country here, which is all part of God's plan,
Right.
we somehow failed to remember the old landmark. The schools was established out of the church for the black people. The businesses was established from the black church. The messages was given at the black church. And because of time, and we've not evolved for the better, but we evolved to a systematic system that takes us away from the foundation of salvation, the foundation of righteousness.
Right.
So now we have a history that we are repeating, but not the repeated history of what we need to repeat.
Right. And I said this, the history that we're forgetting is that God was the center.
Yes.
It used to be where, like I said, Sundays was a time of worship. Like at our house, we couldn't cook, clean, do anything strenuous too much on a Sunday.
Yes.
All the cooking was done on Saturday, and I think that might have been a little bit, but that was just our grandmother's way of, we're going to
Reverencing
just
God.
shut it down and
Yeah.
reverence. This is a day of worship. This is God. She said God's day. This is the Lord's day. And so we had to shut it down. There was no extra. You surely wasn't going to, like in our family, social drinking was
Forbidden.
normal,
Okay.
but not on Sunday. You wasn't going to break that seal on Sunday.
Okay.
And I think even in the South, there was laws on the book. There was a dry.
Oh, yeah.
There was a dry. That was a dry day.
Dry day. You couldn't buy alcoholic beverages. That's why recently, in the last few years, they start passing laws to allow people to sell liquor on Sunday, alcohol beverage on Sunday,
Right.
which they try to hide it with food, so that way to balance off for whatever reason. But they just show how times we're not careful with the spiral down.
Right.
And
Right.
for the black person and for the black church, and I'm reason I'm saying church because that represents me.
Right.
And it's part of the black history is that we had such a reverence for God, and somewhere we have lost our reference to God. We become almost like paganistic people.
Right. As a matter of fact, a generation that forgets God is a lost generation.
Yes. Yeah.
And I remember, and I'm kind of building a little bit here because I'm kind of trying to show where I'm going with this. But back in the day, I remember, like I said, the family references on Sunday. God was the thought for the day. Like even those who cussed on Sunday for some reason, they would almost. I remember that my grandmother would tell my father, "Watch your mouth. This is the Lord's day."
Yeah.
You know, in other words, everything was a reminder on Sunday. Out of all your hustle and bustle all week long that you done and whatever, and if you partied on Saturday, on the Lord's day, we reverenced God and we remembered Him, our Savior. And so I remember having this in our mind that Saturday was a preparation for the Lord's day. We're going to go to church. We'll come home, we'll eat, and you'll sit around and you'll have a little conversation or whatever, but nothing strenuous, just family time basically. But our generation now, because I remember almost at the time frame where the Lord's Day wasn't that important. It started off with not going to church as often as you used to, and then you would digress to where you're going on those only special
Participate activities.
Yes.
Vacation.
Special holidays during the services, Easter, Christmas, only Mother's Day. Then you got down to those. And so somewhere along the line, we lost our reverence for the Lord. And not that the day was that, but it was a reminder of everybody coming together with one mind about the Lord. And so the generations kind of veered away from God.
Okay.
And now we find ourselves as a people that we do not reverence God, our deliverer, our Lord and our Savior. And now we find ourselves, our people are in a destitute place in some areas, like the crime rate and the drug use and the gang banging and all of these things. The seedy used to be very small in the black community. It was just a small group of people who were what they considered seedy or not up to standard, up to par. And now it seems to be growing and getting bigger and bigger. And I believe because we've gotten away from what we knew as a people toward God. And so now we are serving other things, and now we are forgetting the history. We're not looking back and remembering what we once were as a people under God, a people that reverence God. And now, because we are forgetting our history, now we are digressing. And now the people are in a state, I think our communities, a lot of black communities are in trouble.
Well, a lot of that is because of no accountability or the Adam and Eve blame game. We've been faulting the Caucasian or white people, as we say, for our decline of our failures today, when out of oppression and held back, we accomplished so much more.
Yeah.
The great accomplishment, the hair roller, everything this thing was made under oppression. And now that we are free, the question is how free are we? Because freedom doesn't mean to be free to be foolish. Freedom means to be free from the thing we used to be, it couldn't be. Now that we're able to be that and more, we have not passed down the generation information about the Father that brought us through.
The self-pride
Yes.
as far as a people, having pride in ourselves as a people. I think we've lost that art as a whole. I'm not saying in every case, because we do know that there are black people accomplishing wonderful things. But we, as a people, if we're not, for the majority, all overcoming and all moving in the same direction, we can't just applaud the few that are doing, or the ones that are doing well, and forget about
Those that
the
have
ones
not
who are
made it.
not, that have lost their way as to who we are as a black people or as a people. And I think I wanted to kind of go to the part where I wanted to talk about our history, because if we don't remember the history, like I said, we'll repeat.
Yeah.
And during the time of when we were emancipated, black people right afterwards became some of the most successful ex-slaves that there were.
Yes.
We were in government, we were accomplishing great things, we were educating ourselves, and we came directly from the fields
Okay.
to the Senate, from the fields to educating ourselves, from the fields.
Lawmakers.
Lawmakers.
Yes.
We went from the field to that, and for some reason now we feel as though we are far from the field, but we give excuses today
For a field mentality.
for what happened back then, as if we're not able now to pick ourselves up like those who came from the field were able to pick themselves up.
Back in, I think it was early 40s, and my timing may be way off, but there was a place called Black Wall Street. And you can look it up on YouTube. And Black Wall Street came out of Oklahoma, where a group of blacks got together and they have built their little town. And out of that town building process, they established businesses, banks, their own bank, they had their own grocery store, they had their own doctors. Everything was all in this small city town called Oklahoma. It was in Oklahoma, which is called Black Wall Street.
Right.
Unfortunately, there was a invasion of poor white people, and when they say part of our government was involved, according to the history.
Okay,
they
so
came
it's back in 1921 when the massacre happened.
after that, yeah. So these black people was very successful. I mean, they had their own salons, they had their own everything. Everything's in that little town, and they was doing very well. In fact, to the point that the white people outside the city was borrowing money from them.
Right.
To the point they got mad one day. They said, "Well, why are we borrowing when we just go take?" And then from that point, they went in, they invaded the city. It's kind of like AI. They invaded the city
Right.
and just took the city.
Right.
And history plays that same piece of land is still there today that's not being utilized.
This happened in Tulsa.
In Tulsa, yes.
Tulsa, Oklahoma, and basically I'm just reading here, one of the most prominent concentrations of African American business in the United States during the early 20th century. It was popularly known as America's Black Wall Street.
Yes.
Until the Tulsa Race Massacre in 1921, in which white residents massacred as many as 300 black residents and hundreds of, of the citizens that were there. And basically, these African Americans, some of their parents or grandparents, former slaves, but figured out how to
Work together
and create wealth
within their
own. And it wasn't because they were trying to exclude any other race. It was because they were ousted.
Yes.
And they weren't accepted. So they had to turn in with themselves and make life good for each other, because they weren't allowed to, participate with white community or to share with the white community. So they had to actually come up with their own ways and means.
Yes.
And in that, they became very successful.
Yes. And that's the point I try to get people to understand.
Right.
Is that it's been done before. That's history. That's good history.
Right.
Why don't we go back? So a lot of what you're hearing today, and I get very excited when you talk about these type of things,
Yeah,
because I'm an advocate for blacks being successful.
Right.
I'm a black man, have a business,
Right.
and I believe that we have a part to play in allowing that part of history to repeat itself, because it did work. God was with them.
Right.
Somebody said, "Well, if God would, why did that happen?" Well, God's with all of us, but time has changed for all of us.
Right.
But even though that was invasion done, doesn't mean we can't start over and do it again.
Right.
In fact, today we're about the most spending of all people on the planet when it comes down to money.
Biggest consumers.
Biggest consumers. Thank you
Right,
for saying.
right.
And today, that shows how we don't no longer value our own and don't stay in our community. We have to go and depend on others to do what we're supposed to do ourselves. So if we can pull up from the bootstrap, then we got to start with ourselves. You can't wait for Jim to come give me a break. If Ray Ray got the break for me, let Ray Ray help me.
Right.
But the mindset that we have today is that I got mine, you get yours.
Right.
In Black Wall Street, it wasn't that. We all worked together.
And like I said, even though it was the times that dictated that they had to look to each other, we failed to understand that we're in times where we have to look to each other.
Yes.
We still do. And I think one of my biggest points in this whole thing is that these people were doing it from nothing.
Yes.
They basically built wealth from their hands and helping one another and sharing and trading with each other, and then created a city or a town rather that what they were thriving.
In fact, they basically took a biblical principle
Yeah.
of building the Tower of Babel, and not in that form, but it says, and God says, the way they're working together, I paraphrase, is nothing they won't be able to accomplish. Because they're working together.
Right.
Anytime a group of people, whether it be a race of Caucasian, Asian, or Hispanic, if they work together and thrive, it's because of the unity.
Right.
We as a people in this country that basically built this country do not work together. And we hear that, but we don't do anything about it. It's just like a couch voter. You won't go to the poll, but you're going to vote your vote on the couch, which is not going to count.
You're going to fuss about
Yeah, it's not going to count
what's
for
being
anything.
done.
Yeah, so in order for us to stop the genocide in our community, among our people, we got to get the cancer out of our people.
And we've got to take, my thought is we've got to take the excuses away.
Yes. That would be the cancer to me.
Yes, we gotta remove the excuses for why we are not thriving as a people, because here it shows that oppression, which is these people were closer to the act of slavery than we are.
Just one street from over.
Right, they were. Right, these people were walking from some of these people, because even though the massacre happened in 1921, for them to become a thriving community means that they had been doing this for a minute, that it didn't just pop up in 1921. That means back in the 19th century, they were actually making, this is like right from the fields, they decided that this is just how we're going to make it. We're going to have to come together, pull together, put our resources together, buy and sell our goods.
If we could bring that mindset back again, just like the certain communities come together. You know, let's be realistic. Asian, the Hispanic, the white people, how you want to classify, they all work together to accomplish their goals. We the only people of all the people who once did that can't do that no more.
Right.
And because, go back to you what you stated again, an excuse. The laws of the land does not mean you cannot prosper.
Right.
It's that you got to use the laws of the land lawfully.
Right.
If you're going to break the law, then you're going to get a law situation.
Right.
If you operate legally, then there's no way they can stop you from doing what you need to do. That's what happened with the Black Wall Street. Unfortunate that never happened again, but doesn't mean it cannot happen again. Sometimes that's part of history that a lot of people didn't know about. I didn't know about it until probably about 7 years ago.
Right.
And when I saw that,
it was a hidden
oh my
truth.
goodness, it was a hidden truth.
Right, but it's if you ever get the chance to go and watch that, I think it's on YouTube.
YouTube, Black Wall Street.
You can watch the Black Wall Street, and I will be inserting a portion of that into this programming, and this is just so that we can be educated. But I want to say that although I am applauding what they have done, I'm not advocating separation.
By far.
I'm just saying that we have to remove the excuse that we were once enslaved is the reason why we have the mentality now of not being able to get up and be accomplished as a people. And so that to me is the history that I say, if we don't look back and remember some of our history, if we forget it, we see. And here we have forgotten. We're not remembering what we were, who we were as a people. We're not looking to the resilience that we have, the ability, God-given ability that we have as a people to be able to survive and to overcome. And I took this back to the biblical times as well, with the children of Israel coming out of Egypt. And we like to, nowadays I have heard, I'm not going to say all of us, but I have heard many arguments for our young black men or young black women being unaccomplished or not being able to pull themselves up by the bootstrap because they were descendants of slaves. But in the Bible, I just remember where the children of Israel coming out of Egypt, that there was no place in there where God gave them an excuse for carrying the Egyptian ways out with them, and that he gave them no leeway, that it was okay to be in a mindset of rebelling against what he has put out because they were enslaved once. And they were enslaved 400 years by the Egyptians. But he still, when he made the way for them to be free, he expected for them to leave those Egyptian ways, or to leave the mindset that they had back in as a slave, and to walk into the promised land with the mind that their God was with them. And that, to me, is what we as a people need to gravitate to.
And then you think of the parallel. Here you got the children of Israel was in slavery for 400 years. Here blacks are in slavery for 400 years. Only these two segments of people have battled slavery, except the Israelites, the children of Israel, moved away from the slavery and accomplished. The blacks moved away from slavery as well, but did not fully accomplish. Just the pockets.
Well, I think what it was is, it goes back to my initial thought about God.
Yes.
That when we remove God from the equation, then you will find yourselves with the inability to rise. And that's what I believe our generations now, these generations now, we have gotten away from God being the center and leaning and depending on God, and looking to the hill for our help, asking God and praying to God for direction. And so now we are lost.
And the sad thing, woman of God, is that in slavery, they were not breaking the law to go to jail. But now that we're free, we're breaking laws to go to jail.
Right.
Something's wrong with that.
Something's wrong with that.
We come from a forced labor for nothing to now go labor again for free for nothing. And then, not saying that the system is not working against us.
There's definite flaws in the system.
But don't let the system become your system of excuse.
Right.
That's my point.
And that's my point. Because even back in slavery times